The Himba are indigenous peoples of Namibia and Angola who use an effective method of justice that really caught my attention when I first heard it. It is their tradition that every tribe member is given a unique song before they are even born. A mother sings the song to her not yet conceived child when she has just the first thought of even having a child, and she eventually teaches the song to the entire village. This is so that if at any time throughout a tribe member's life they commit a crime or some antisocial act, the village will gather around that individual and sing their song to them. This tradition is based on the idea that remembrance of one's true identity is the antidote to criminal behavior. I also see this tradition as a calling of the individual back into connection with the tribe. True connection with community is a state of being that simply does not make room for offense against community. Now it's clear to see how in contrast this practices with our current approach to corrections in the United States. The Himba tradition is based on connection with self and community, as opposed to separation, practiced literally through the locking away of wayward individuals, more per capita in the United States than in any other nation. Now this is a problem, and it's a problem that I'm very passionate about. However, there are plenty of TED Talks and documentaries about the problem of mass incarceration in our country. As a mental health therapist, for juvenile offenders who have been identified as the highest risk young men in the state, I can attest that there's a self-identity sickness that happens within the walls of the facilities that house our delinquent youth. Common self-perceptions include, I'm a bad kid, I'm going to end up in prison for sure, I'm a junkie, I'm a norteño, a sureño. Though none of these youth were given a song before they were born, if they had been, it would have certainly been forgotten. And within the corrections facilities in which they now reside, there is certainly no community at large calling them back to themselves and to their people. Now, because there have already been a lot of documentaries about this, what I want to do with my talk is to present a solution that begins with you. It's fair to say that I've lost significant faith in the administration of government agencies and know that the solution is going to begin on the ground level with communities and with helping professionals. The solution I want to talk about is healing self-identity. And it starts with you, because we must heal our own self-perception before the self-perception of our most oppressed and at-risk tribe members, if you will, can heal. Here is why it must start with you. How do you see yourself? Are you capable of being broken or defective or bad in some area of life? Do you possibly have any beliefs about yourself that you are inherently sick or a sinner, or some other belief about yourself that speaks to a limitation of yours permanently as opposed to in time and possible of being corrected? Well, if so, if you hold any of those beliefs about self, then there's a high likelihood that you can see your brothers and sisters of the world this way and convey to them, whether in a way that's spoken or unspoken, that their capacity to be defective is their inevitable condition. Now trust me, I've had plenty of personal temptation to buy into the idea that I can be broken and defective. As a young woman who felt empty and hopeless, I became addicted to drugs. For a time, disconnected from all self-love and outside sources of love in my life. And for the duration of time that I saw myself as broken and hopeless, I continued to do behaviors that validated this. Now, it was when I could see, reflected in the eyes of others and in their experiences, in particular those of recovered addicts who knew of their own ability to heal themselves and connect with others, no matter how low they had gotten themselves into an addiction. That was when I became open to the belief that there was hope, that I could make something out of my life, and that was when I did. I now live a life full of connection. Addicts and alcoholics are perhaps, well, when they're in recovery, are perhaps some of the most powerful agents of change that you will ever meet. And I think that the reason why is because they've accepted and forgiven errors within themselves and can therefore do that for others to help them recover from a really self-destructive form of self-identity confusion. I once had an experience working with a young woman who was addicted to meth and heroin, and she was attempting to get clean in a 12-step program. If you're unfamiliar with the 12 steps, there's this process involved where you make this inventory of all of the harms that you've done, and then you admit those to somebody else and to a higher power. I was the person that she chose to admit her harms to. So I sat before her and listened as she read her list of errors. She then got to something that she couldn't bring herself to say to me. She was literally bawling in shame, and she said, "I can't say this one out loud, I've never told anyone." I encouraged her. "You can do this. I can't imagine that there's anything that you could say that would make me see you any differently." And that was true. I saw her as a perfect and innocent woman of courage as she sat before me attempting to free herself with all of her might from her past. She spit it out. She had sold her body for drugs. I got up out of my chair and I raised my hands in the air and started celebrating. "You did it. You said it." And I looked at her and smiled and loved her and I hugged her. And she saw that I knew of her darkest hour, and I only saw her as more courageous for accepting it about herself. And then I saw her evolve in front of my eyes. Reincarnation is the best word that I can think of to describe what happened in the room that day. She was one woman before the experience, and she was another woman afterwards, as she came to accept what she thought made her unacceptable. There's a course in miracles, or there's a mind consciousness training program called A Course in Miracles, that teaches that perhaps the figure of Jesus Christ was able to heal because he didn't see those that he healed as sick or broken. He had a vision to see their wholeness. How? Because this enlightened individual had knowledge of his own. It was when others could see reflected in his eyes their own wholeness, that their sudden belief that they already are okay, already are safe or saved, if you will, healed them physically. We actually see this phenomenon happen all the time in our everyday lives. Have you ever had someone believe that you could do something that you doubted you could do, and have you had their belief turn yours on within yourself so that you could accomplish? This is how human performance in sports has progressed over the years. We now know that El Capitan can be free soloed, no ropes. That was just undreamt of only decades ago. Human potential is limited or expanded by belief in perception. I guess you can say it becomes somewhat of a cheerleader for those people who get to look their shadows in the eyes and have the task of remembering who they really are in the face of their darkness. Those have become some of the most integrated and service-oriented people that I know. However, they were forced to greet their shadows, whether it was through incarceration or drug addiction, weight loss journeys, trauma, or loss. A Course in Miracles also teaches that errors are simply calls for correction. They happen in time and they have no implication on who we are in eternity. When we define ourselves as human beings who make correctable or even useful mistakes, well, that's how we behave, as opposed to behaving like an inherently bad kid. Now I want to talk about a couple of specific interventions to layer over this paradigm shift that I've spoken of. The first one that works on self-identity is mindfulness. Mindfulness is observing the present moment without judgment on purpose. Mindfulness helps one connect with this self that can observe thoughts, sensations, emotions, and impulses from this perspective that's eternally calm and still. A formal mindfulness practice recommended daily provides spaciousness between what one may consider their higher self and all of those ever-shifting energies that happen in our bodies and our brains. My brain produced a number of thoughts that if I would have evaluated as true, would have prevented me from doing this talk. I'm too messy to do a TED Talk. Who am I to get up there? Mindfulness is the tool by which I could notice those thoughts, thank my brain for sharing them, remember who I truly am, which is but the observer of my thoughts, and then let those thoughts pass through my awareness without attaching to them. The second intervention I want to talk about is trauma-focused therapies, in particular EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So at the bottom of the lasting psychological effects of trauma is a maladaptive I am statement. Perhaps the one that we think of most often, associated with PTSD, I am not safe. It's identification with the self in the past that was endangered, as opposed to the self that is safe in the present moment. Now, attachment traumas, such as separation from parents through adoption, or worse, neglect or abuse by caregivers in early childhood, leaves other false I ams imprinted. I am unlovable. I cannot trust anyone. I have no control. Or commonly, I am responsible, it's all my fault, there's something wrong with me. Identification with the child of the past who was given these messages from the people that they were supposed to be able to depend on. These are pervasive views of self, very often seen in incarcerated youth. Now, EMDR works to activate the processing system in the brain that moves experience to higher learning. Traumatic experience overwhelms this system so that it doesn't work on its own, and traumatic information, including negative beliefs about self, refire and refire inappropriately throughout life until therapies like this can assist to move it to higher learning. So my message is this: we need to heal our own perception in order to heal others and the institutions in society that perpetuate disconnection. So locate any beliefs about yourself that feel anything less than expansive and loving, and connect with that part of self that was sung into this world before you were even born. When you remember your truth, your song, you inevitably remember that of your tribe members in order to heal them. Thank you.